Hurricane Ian has made landfall in the southern part of Florida on the west coast, and indications and of the storm's damage. You know, it's daytime now, so people are still trying to get people out of their homes. It's a little safer now, and rescue missions are happening, although of course still not safe if you're a regular person down there. But my point being is we still don't know the extent of the damage and the death toll, but local officials are essentially saying that it's going to be in the hundreds at the very least, because this storm was near Category 5. It's still considered a Category 4. And the experts that study this kind of stuff have said that this is the waters in the area around Florida have been unseasonably warm, which has increased the intensity of the storm. How many times do we have to say this? This is only going to happen more and more as the ramifications for climate change continue to be more acutely felt as the months and years go on, when we don't do anything substantial to combat this. You know, the storm surges were something like 18 feet above ground, 12 feet above ground, 16 feet, different reports are showing. And the areas that have been most affected thus far are Naples and I think Fort Worth is down there. And here's a clip of the Weather Channel's Jim Cantore in the middle of this storm. This is an aside because we're talking more generally about the storm's effects, but this practice of putting reporters in the middle of these dangerous conditions is just enough of this. This is not the way that employees should have to, put pelts on the horse or whatever, or get their get these shots to advance their careers. This is sick. He's nearly killed here.
Even if they want to, they shouldn't be allowed to. You shouldn't be modeling this kind of behavior because it trivializes the whole point you're trying to say about getting people out and into safety. We have drones now. Set up cameras that are like weather resistant that you can control remotely, and then you don't need a guy out there getting hit by a branch. Oh,
and I'm sorry, I said Fort Worth. I meant Fort Myers. Excuse me. But anyway, here's this clip of agreed on that. Matt, it sends the entirely wrong message. It's just there to get people visually engaged, and that's not worth it. But this just gives you a sense of how intense the storm is down there.
Styrofoam and things like that are like underneath the roofing, maybe in the roof. It just came flying by. All right, you know what? I think I'm just going to come in here for a second.
Yeah. I mean, the street sign is flattened.
Please do.
I mean, that branch there just sailed over his head like, oh,
be all right?
No, he may not be all right.
I'm fine.
Well, he's trying to brace himself now. He's going to get blown away.
All right.
I mean, that is not, to put it mildly, unsafe working conditions for the Weather Channel's team there, including the people behind the scenes. But you know, we're already hearing different people characterize this storm as once in 100 years, once in 1,000 years. As I mean, it's been over 100 hurricanes that have hit Florida, I think, since these things started to be documented in the 19th century. They're continuing to increase in intensity and going to harm more and more people. And there are a lot of people in Florida who are older. It's a state where many people retire, and they don't necessarily have the resources or ability to leave the state, and are also may have less mobility in terms of sheltering themselves, let alone the people who don't have the funds just generally to leave the state or to find shelter, or who may be losing wages because they work a gig job or they don't have guaranteed pay when they're not able to work. Like, the ramifications of this are not just, you know, storm damage. It also is going to kill people and harm people economically who have less at their disposal for quite a long period of time. These are the many different branches of how climate change is going to continue to make its effects felt. But here's Ron DeSantis, governor of the state, being a leader here, speaking about Hurricane Ian making landfall and making this same point that, I mean, could not be more childish, frankly.
Right now, if you look in Central Florida, you're looking at potential major flooding in Orange and Seminole counties, St. Johns River, all the way up potentially into Northeast Florida and Jacksonville. The amount of water that's been rising and will likely continue to rise today, even as the storm is passing, is basically a 500-year flood event. And I know Seminole County has done evacuations. I know they've opened shelters, but we're going to see a lot of images about the destruction that was done in Southwest Florida, and obviously we have massive assets there. But people should just understand this storm is having broad impacts across the state, and some of the flooding you're going to see in areas hundreds of miles from where this made landfall are going to set records, and that's going to obviously be things that that will need to be responded to.
Oh, did he mention there the 500-year flood event? Yeah. Okay, good. I was making sure I didn't read it and imagine that he said it. But it's not a 500-year flood event. This has happened so many times just within my lifetime that these kinds of hurricanes have devastated Florida, and of course Katrina, doing what it did
Ida,
in terms
Maria,
of harm to
Harvey.
yeah. And I don't know if he reads the news about what happened in Puerto Rico just 2 weeks ago.
Fiona.
Yeah, the 1/5 of the island is still without power there, and they were unable to get fuel because ships had to be docked there because the Biden administration was slow to waive the Jones Act, so non-U.S. ships were able to get to Puerto Rico and give people power. But I mean, look, DeSantis is in his, governor leadership mode there, so he's not going to say too much political. But I still think the characterization of these things as once every 500 years as rare events is malpractice, because it does not. And I don't expect a Republican politician to do this, but you have to make a connection that, no, these are going to be once every year now, and probably more intense as the years go on, because we've decided that greed and consumption is way more important than saving the planet.
Yeah, DeSantis also a climate denier, and the point is like even if because I heard this too growing up in North Dakota, where the Red River would regularly flood. Like 3 out of the 5 years I was an undergrad, and we missed significant time all those years because we had to sandbag. And every time it was like, oh, this is a 100-year flood. It's a 100-year flood, and it's like, well, maybe there's like a 100-year flood, but there's more than like 100 places, right? Or there's 500 places, so there's going to be a lot of your chances, I guess, are going up. I'm playing this dumb mathematical game with it, but I mean, your point is right about climate change. We need to be however the frequency of these things is changing, the state has responsibility to do a lot more to protect people and to help people evacuate. Like we saw cops going around neighborhoods saying, all right, this is your last chance, get out. It costs, I didn't know this because I'm in North Dakota and I've never had to evacuate for something like this, about $1,200 to evacuate. Like that's something the state should be assisting.
Yeah, well, especially if they're going to be as not acting whatsoever on climate change and denying it altogether. Florida is going to be especially vulnerable given how low many of the areas of the state are, and the islands are to sea level. So I'm hopeful that eventually they get DeSantis out of office and have somebody in there who's going to take this seriously, because this is not going to get better. It's only going to get worse.